Hey, what's good, my fellow masters? Let's talk about an upcoming feature update that is expected with the 6th anniversary campaign. You may recall in some of my previous videos, whenever I was discussing a certain permanent or story-locked 5-star servant, I noted they would be an available option to choose as your free SSR come July. Well, July, and more importantly, the 6th anniversary for NA is nearly here, and that means this special feature will soon be implemented. So, what are the details? Basically, it is a one-time summon of a 5-star servant of your choice from among a select pool of SSRs. To be eligible, you just need to have cleared the Fuyuki Singularity. The last time we had something like this was during NA's 17 million downloads campaign back in April of 2022. Masters were given an exchange ticket and could use that ticket to select from a pool of 25 SSRs, all of whom were permanent. And there were some other conditions involved, like sending your SSR of choice at least once, and also raising their bond level to 5 in order to permanently add them to your Chaldea. For this special SSR summon, no such conditions exist. In order to claim, simply head to Da Vinci's workshop. If Fuyuki has been cleared, you should see a section that indicates summon a 5-star servant here, or something to that effect. It will be fairly obvious. Once you tap to enter that section, the available servants you can choose will greet you, and it's a fairly long list at 32 SSRs in all. Once you've made your selection and gone through the confirmation, your new SSR servant will be placed in your present box. Go there to claim them, and there you have it. Your new SSR will be in your inventory, and notice no temporary indicator or whatnot. As I said, there are no additional conditions to this special summon. This will be incredibly useful to new players to help them obtain their first SSR servant without much fuss. And the great news is that this will be a permanent feature. It is not a limited time thing in relation to the 6th anniversary campaign duration. So down the line, if you happen to convince one of your friends to jump into the rabbit hole that is Fate Grand Order, they will be able to access this special SSR summon. Of course, veteran masters can also benefit, especially if there is a particular servant that has been elusive in the past. And unlike the 17 million downloads campaign, which only had a pool of 25 servants to choose from, this special summon has 7 additional servants that will be available as choices. So we have nearly all of the 5-star servants from the permanent summoning pool, plus story lock 5 stars as well. Let's take a relatively brief look at each of the available servants, though please keep in mind this is not intended to be a comprehensive, in-depth review for each of them. I'm just going to highlight their skills, NP, and what I think may make them worth considering. Naturally, this is intended for those that have yet to decide which servant to choose, but could also offer another perspective on things for masters that have already narrowed down their choices. This will be fairly lengthy, so grab a drink, maybe a snack, and let's get into it. For Sabers, there are 3 lovely ladies to choose from, though one of them in particular will probably smack me later for calling her a lady. Oops. Anyway, they are Altera, Artoria, and the Fiery Mordred, and all 3 of them are Buster AoE servants. Altera has a few things that sets her apart from her fellow AoE Buster Sabers. The Arbiter of Good and Bad Civilization can remove enemy defensive buffs like evade or invincibility, along with buffing the party's NP damage. She can raise her resistance to offensive debuffs, recover a decent amount of HP, and boost her crit star absorption. In the future, this gets a rank up to include a bit of a critical damage increase and a 30% NP battery on a 5-turn cooldown, which is important since this will enable Altera to work within the double coin Skya system for 3-turn buster farming. She can also buff her own attack a good amount and supply some crit stars. Altera's MP just has one effect on top of the AoE damage, reducing the target's defense for a few turns. OG Saber arguably has the most simplistic set of skills relative to the other 2, but that doesn't mean it's not effective, quite the opposite. Artoria can provide the party an increase to their attack, though it's a dated 18% at max. I'm really hoping this gets remedied someday soon. Her second skill is fairly unique, being able to change all of her cards for that turn into Buster cards. It also increases her NP damage and buster performance, really encouraging that NP Buster Brave chain for dealing out some Unga Bunga shenanigans. Artoria also has a 30% battery and a relatively short 5-turn cooldown that also provides some crit stars. Her NP is pretty simple as well, with the only effect being a self-charge to her MP gauge. But it is this charge effect on her MP coupled with her 30% battery that makes the Face of the Fate franchise one of the most compatible servants in the Double Coin Skya system. Typically, either the Atlas Academy Mystic Code or the Plug Suit is required, but for Saber, the Mystic Code is completely flexible. Mordred's overall kit is similar to her quote-unquote old man's, but she has a couple of effects more focused towards crits. Mo-san can buff her buster performance for a turn, though this will be upgraded with a future rank up that stretches this to 3 attacks, along with a crit damage buff for her buster cards and an increase to her own attack. That rank up will complement her second skill's ability to drop crit stars, have her 2 buster cards absorb those stars, and increase her general crit strength. Finally, she too has a 30% NP battery with a defense up effect and self-buff removal. Mordred's NP deals extra damage to Arthur trait enemies and also charges her NP gauge. Like Artoria, this particular effect on her NP, in combination with her 30% battery, makes Mordred immediately compatible with Double Coin Skya. But since her NP battery is on a 6-turn cooldown, the Atlas Academy Mystic Code is required. In isolation, Artoria has the highest NP damage output among the 3, but the future buff to Mordred's first skill will catch her up to dear old dad, and even more so with Double Coin Skya. Altera, of course, is capable of removing defensive buffs from the enemies, which adds to her still respectable MP1 damage. While all 3 of them can certainly perform solidly as an AoE Saber, my pick would be Artoria, with Mordred pretty close behind, nearly a toss-up depending on which Saber face you prefer. Though Artoria does have a slight edge with having more freedom of choice in regards to the Mystic Code used with Double Coin Skya, and no future buffs to wait on. For archers, you can choose from 3 gents and teddy bear. Setting aside stuffed animals for a moment, we have Arjuna, Napoleon, and the first story-locked SSR in the pool, Nikola Tesla. All 3 of them AoE buster types. Then representing the single-target MP servants among the archers is Orion. Well, more like Artemis as his proxy, since, he's a bear plushie. Looking at the genius inventor Nikola Tesla, he's able to increase the rates of both his MP generation and the party's NP generation, though at different rates respectively. Around March of 2024, his first skill will get a rank up that, among other things, grants the party an increase to buff success rates by up to 20%. And this will help to make the MP damage increase from his second skill more consistent overall, coupled with the skill's increase to his attack. The eternal rival to Edison is also equipped with an Ignore Invincibility, a Star Bomb, and a 50% battery on a Double Coin Skya friendly 6-turn cooldown. Tesla's MP has a chance to stun enemy targets, plus does extra damage to servants with either the Earth or Sky attributes. All in all, a very solid AoE archer. Napoleon is pretty solid as well. The surprisingly tall FGO version of the famed French Emperor can buff the party's attack with an additional brief attack bonus for himself. He can further increase the party's NP damage and crit star generation, and he has an Ignore Invincibility and gains stars per turn tied in with his 30% battery, which is on a 6-turn cooldown. Unfortunately, not quite able to work with Double Coin Skya by themselves, but this could be ultimately remedied by adding Oberon into the mix to allow 3-turn buster farming. Bropolion also covers a niche against divine enemies, his MP doing extra damage towards them, both servants and regular enemies alike. Plus, it will ignore defense before activating and drops 20 crit stars. As for Arjuna, well, he has an aspect to his kit that's a little awkward. He can buff his crit star gen rate and gain debuff immunity, both for fairly lengthy durations, which is quite good. The fierce rival to Karna also has a heal per turn, crit star per turn, and a 10% NP charge per turn effects, all of which last for 5 turns. But then his NP battery is 25%, on a very lengthy 8-turn cooldown. Not that NP batteries are the end-all in regards to a servant, but in this case it does fall outside of the Coin Skya buster meta, and not even adding Oberon will make it work. For his third skill, he is able to boost both his Buster and NP damage. Arjuna's MP has a bit of an anti-divine niche, but it involves the instant kill mechanic. Not the most reliable of things, even though divine targets do get an increased chance of dying. Overall, I just think Napoleon or Tesla have strengths a little bit easier to leverage in comparison to Arjuna. Between the three of them, their non-NP1 non-trait effect damage are not too far off from each other, with Napoleon ahead of the other two, Arjuna coming in next with Tesla bringing up the rear. Though factoring in Tesla's anti-earth or anti-sky attributes servant niche, he switches spots with Arjuna. As for Orion and Artemis, they can be a fairly potent anti-male servant. Orion's first skill buffs his attack and debuff resistance, plus a brief increase to his defense. And naturally, he does a significant amount of extra damage to male enemies. He is all about the waifus after all. To round things out for his skills, there is also an evade and buff to his crit damage at an unusual scaling percentage. Orion's single target MP is arts based and has a handful of debuff effects inflicted on the enemy. Attack down, critical chance down, and a reduction to their MP gauge. Now, I think Orion Artemis is a decent unit with the proper support. The main issue is that there is a free 3-star single target archer in Uriel, who also has an effective anti-male niche. So it's hard to recommend Orion to take up a precious free SSR summon when there is another alternative. So that leaves Arjuna, Napoleon, and Tesla, and my pick is kind of a toss-up between Tesla and Napoleon, though I would have to give the edge to Tesla for his 50% battery and how well it fits in with Double Coin Skya, plus being effective against 2 trait types versus Napoleon's 1. This AC-addled inventor also has a scarcity advantage being story-locked, and Napoleon being permanent could randomly show up on almost any banner. Like the available archer options, there are 4 lancers to choose from. Similarly, there are 3 AoE servants and 1 single target. The lone ST lancer is Enkidu, leaving Karna, Bradamante, and the story-locked SSR Artoria Pendragon Lancer covering the AoE options. Let's start off with Enkidu. Noted to be a very powerful single target lancer, capable of the highest damage at NP1 among ST SSR lancers. To help with this, the Chain of Heaven's first skill buffs his Buster performance and randomly buffs either his quick or arts performance. He can lower an enemy's crit attack chance along with removing their evasion buff and grants himself his own evasion. Then, when Enkidu may have taken a bit too much damage, he can use his massive 5 to 10k self-heal that also removes any debuffs. This skill will later get a rank up that adds a 50% battery effect to make firing off his MP that much easier. And regarding Enkidu's Buster NP, it debuffs the target with a defense down first, does extra damage against the trait Threat to Humanity, along with a 500% chance to stun an enemy with the Divine trait. He's definitely a good ST Lancer to have, and it's actually not uncommon to utilize him as a pretty effective solo unit. I've always found Karna to be a solid performer that does very good Buster AoE damage. The Hero of Benefaction can reduce an enemy's debuff resistance, which helps the NP seal take effect. He can boost both his Buster card's performance and his MP damage, and then there are buffs to his crit star generation and critical damage, tied with an NP battery. Unfortunately, it's 25% like Arjuna's, which again is a little awkward to work with the Double Coin Skya Oberon system. NP-wise, it will lower the Buster resistance of all targets and does extra damage against enemies with the Divine trait. Bradamante is probably best known for her beautiful NP animation. Yet aside from that, I feel she's often overlooked, mainly because she has to share the AoE Quick Lancer role with incredibly good SR units like Parvati and Valkyrie. But I think she can perform fairly decently if given the chance. Bradamante's offensive buffs consist of a 3-turn increase to her quick and arts cards, and she can buff her defense for 3 turns along with gaining a guts effect. Plus she has a targetable NP charge of up to 20% with the added effect of removing debuffs, something that is quite useful to have. Then her rather infamous MP has a chance to stun all targets and lower their critical attack chance. The overcharge is a helpful MP damage buff that activates first. Now, all jokes aside about her MP animation, Bradamante is capable of 3-turn looping with double Scotty. just not as well as the aforementioned Parvati and Valkyrie. And then we come to the story-locked servant of the bunch, the Lion King Lancer Artoria. This mature version of Artoria just recently got a rank up to her first skill, granting her an increased damage against enemies with either chaotic and or evil alignments, on top of a boost to her buster performance. She can also provide an increase to the party's attack. Plus she can remove debuffs from herself while charging her MP gauge up by 50% on a 6-turn cooldown, thus being compatible with Double Coin Skya for 3-turn farming. Artoria's AoE Buster MP will ignore invincibility prior to doing damage, and it will also charge her MP gauge. Overall, her kit is fairly simple, but effective for farming or when needing to deal with archers that are either chaotic evil or might have an invincibility gimmick. Between the 3 AoE choices, currently Karna does the most NP1 damage, which of course goes even higher when up against divine enemies. Artoria comes in next, but trails a fair amount behind Karna, though her anti-chaotic, anti-evil damage indicates where her true strength lies. And Bradamante shows up at the rear of the 3 for MP damage. My pick for Lancers is another toss-up, this time between Enkidu and Lancer Artoria. I think Enkidu is a really good servant to have in one's roster. His STMP is just so strong, and he can be a good solo unit. But I feel the slight edge goes to Artoria, just for being so compatible with Double Coin Skya to deal with all the farming required in this game. And there's a scarcity factor as well, with Lartoria being story locked and the other Lancers being able to show up on any given banner. Though ultimately it depends on if you're wanting to fill a single target Lancer role or an AoE one, and are unable to roll for Melisyn. The number of rider class SSR options top out the other classes with 6 available choices, 3 single target and 3 AoE. The permanent Achilles, Europa, Ozymandias, and Francis Drake, plus 2 story-locked SSRs, Quetzalcoatl and Queen Maeve. First up, the single target riders with Ozymandias leading off. He is an excellent unit that can provide some support to the party while being an effective attacker. This God King of ancient Egypt can provide the party with an attack buff, and if present on a sunlit field, increase the party's crit damage by a modest amount, along with providing 10 crit stars per turn for 3 turns. For himself, Ozzy can heal for a good amount and has a 60% chance to buff both his attack and defense. His third skill increases the party's buff success rate and thereby ensures that his own chance-based buffs activate with consistency. It also provides the party with an NP charge of 20%. His NP debuffs the enemy with an NP seal and reduces their defense as well. This will be further enhanced with an upcoming NP rank up. More NP damage is always good, but he will also gain the ability to change the field to a sunlit one and reduce his relatively short cooldowns by 1, thereby making his first skill far more effective and Ozzy that much better overall. Another servant related to the sun, we have Quetzalcoatl. As mentioned, this Lucha Libre loving goddess is from the story lock pool. She also has a couple of abilities to support the party, with an attack buff for all that drops a hefty amount of crit stars. Then she has a targetable buster performance increase that includes a guts. But you're likely to use that buster buff on herself to maximize her burst crit damage capability. Ketz does have an 30% NP battery on a 6-turn cooldown as well, which gives her the potential to fire off her NP 3 times in a row with a Double Coin Skya Oberon setup. Cuckoo's MP has 2 effects, an NP seal to the target and a 5-turn burn debuff from the overcharge. All in all, I find Ketz quite solid and is able to provide utility and dish out the crits when needed. The second story lock servant from the rider choices is the sultry Celtic Queen Maeve. This cheese-hating, coup-obsessed Eternal Lady is another servant with an anti-male niche. But she can also provide some support to her male allies as well, with an NP charge of up to 30%, that also works on allies with the Fey trait. At the same time, Maeve herself gains an immunity to debuffs for a relatively lengthy 3 turns, a per-turn HP recovery and a per-turn NP charge. She enhances the party's attack and further increases the attack of male party members while healing herself for a decent amount. Maeve can also both lower enemy defenses briefly and has a good chance to charm one male target for a turn. Maeve's NP overcharge deals extra damage towards male enemy targets, along with reducing their mental debuff resistance, paving the way for her third skill's charm effect. Queen Maeve's kit has a lot going for it, especially when teamed up with other male servants, and her bonus damage against male targets is quite potent. When Ozzy gets his NP rank up, his NP1 damage becomes the highest among ST riders, though if up against male enemies, Maeve's NP1 damage will significantly overtake Ozzy's. And Ket's, well, it would be nice if she eventually got an NP buff. Now, if you're more interested in AoE riders, then I think all three are pretty solid. The quick-paced Achilles can act as a decent farming unit and provide some tanking duties for harder battles. This famous hero of the Trojan War can boost his quick performance, grants himself an invincibility effect while buffing his defense, along with the taunt, thereby making good use of those defensive effects. He also has an NP battery of up to 30%, which also increases his NP generation, to help with his overall looping potential with Double Scotty. Achilles will eventually get a rank up for his MP, providing some nice additional effects like a confusion with a chance to seal skills, and more crit damage for himself. He also has one of the better Bond 10 CEs that provides the party with a 1 attack invincibility on top of boosting his MP damage by 30%. The Buster-wielding Europa is also a bit of an all-rounder, able to farm and in possession of some tools for harder battles. This kind maternal goddess can grant herself a 3 attack invincibility and 3-time debuff resistance, with no turn limit on the effects. Europa is able to buff both her arts and buster cards, plus charge her MP gauge up to 30%. She can also debuff all enemies with a defense and crit chance reduction, along with a decent chance to charm them. Europa's NP has an overcharge that can further increase her buster performance, and she gains a beefy increase to her defense for a turn. It's also worth noting that in a setup that includes double Koenskaya and Oberon, Europa is capable of 3-turn farming. Last up is Francis Drake, another buster servant. This well-endowed pirate captain, I'd say, is more of a farming unit, but does have a couple of things to deal with certain battle gimmicks. Drake can provide a party-wide 1-turn NP damage and attack buff. An upcoming rank up to her second skill allows her to buff her buster cards and ignore the defense of enemies. And she has an NP battery of up to 50% on a 6-turn cooldown that also grants ignore invincibility and drops some crit stars. This 50% NP battery of hers makes Drake fully compatible with double Koenskaya without the need for any other support units. Her MP is on the rather simplistic side with just an overcharge effect that supplies critical stars, though rather useful for a rider with naturally high star absorption. Between the three, Francis Drake with the rank up will do the most MP1 damage. Achilles will eventually leapfrog her when his NP rank up comes up next year. None of them have any particular trait effect damage modifiers, but Drake's is notable for being able to ignore both defense and invincibility with the help of her skills. Of all 6 rider options, I would say that Ozzy is the best general pick. He has some very good utility with a party-wide attack buff and a party-wide 20% NP charge, not to mention being able to increase the buff success rate of the party, something always good to have for all those servants with chance-based skill effects. He's a versatile attacker hybrid support unit. Though, if you're more in need of a farming unit, then I think Drake fits the bill, because, you guessed it, she's good to go with double Koenskaya right out of the gate. And now we come to the casters, which has 5 servants to choose from. The single target Sanzang, and the AoE Anastasia and Scheherazade, and the support types Zheng Liang or My Boy Waver, and Tamamo no Mae. For Sanzang, she's a fairly potent ST Buster caster that I've found to work well within 90 plus nodes. She has a very nice 80% battery, which also boosts her NP damage for a turn. Sanzang has a taunt and can tank a bit with a decent damage cut buff, while also enhancing the party's attack. Providing more utility, she's able to raise the party's NP generation, crit star generation, and notably make everyone immune to debuffs. This adventurous monk's NP will ignore an enemy's defense buffs and lower their crit chance for a turn. Anastasia and Scheherazade both have AoE arts type NPs, and both are capable of NP looping with the help from double Castoria, though Scheherazade does slightly more NP damage and has an anti-king modifier. The overly cautious storyteller can reduce one enemy's NP gauge boost her own arts performance, and charge her own NP gauge by up to 30%. She has a decent chance to charm all male enemies while raising her defense for a couple of turns. Scheherazad's third skill can significantly reduce the attack of a king trait enemy, plus grant herself and the party guts respectively. Her NP provides a damage boost that activates first, and deals the aforementioned extra damage against king trait enemies. It also lowers the enemy's debuff resistance, thus making her anti-male charm ability more effective. The Grand Duchess of Ice is able to ignore invincibility and raise the performance of her arts cards for a turn, along with lowering the debuff resistance of an enemy. She can boost the attack of the party while simultaneously debuffing all enemies' attack. And with her third skill, Anastasia has a chance to stun an enemy as she charges her NP gauge by up to 50%. Her NP's effects impose additional debuffs to enemies, a skill seal, and a reduction to their defense. Between the two AoE casters, either one could perform quite well as arts loopers if you happen to need one that's a caster. Each has their respective strengths. Scheherazade does a bit more NP damage with a specific niche, and can grant the party a useful guts effect, whereas Anastasia is able to ignore invincibility, buff the party's attack, and has a larger NP battery. Then we have one of the most overworked servants in any given Chaldea, Zhuge Liang aka Waver Velvet. His working conditions have improved as there have been a number of 50% NP charge support units added to the game over the years. He's a flexible support caster able to work with quick, arts, or buster teams. Waver can provide attack and defense increases to the party, along with a targetable critical damage buff that's quite potent. And on top of that, Waver can charge the party's NP gauge by 20% and a specific ally by another 30%. His NP produces a few nice effects, reducing all enemies' NP gauge by 1, inflicting curse damage to them, debuffing their defense, and possibly stunning them. The other support caster is Tamamo no Mae, who I found can work quite well to complement Castoria in the arts support department. This Fox Shrine Maiden can increase her allies' NP damage, boost her own defense, and provide some healing along with a potent arts performance increase. Tamamo's support type NP can further heal the party, modestly charge everyone's NP gauge, and reduce the party's skill cooldown by 1. Her overall kit does a variety of beneficial things. Now, my general pick among these 5 servants is either Waver or Tamamo. If you don't yet have a 50% charging support unit in your roster, then go for Waver. Your farming will typically improve. Having him will open up quite a few team configurations that can utilize a friend's Skadi, Castoria, or the soon-to-arrive Koyanskaya, even Oberon. And personally, I think his overall kit is still quite useful when you just need a bit more attack, defense, or crit damage. On the other hand, if you already have a 50% charger like Skadi or Rhinus, but missing a Castoria of your own, then Tamamo can help to add more potency to the arts buffs in a borrowed Castoria team composition. Even if you already have Castoria, there will be times when using a second Castoria is not permitted, so having Tamamo can help in these situations as well, especially if your servant roster is very arts heavy. For the assassin class choices, we drop back down to 3 servants: Osaka Behime, a support type, plus 2 single target servants, Jack the Ripper and the story-locked Li Shuwen. Osaka Behime is an often overlooked support unit, but I feel Chaldea's resident neat shut-in can bring quite a bit to the table. Party-wide crit damage increase, a targetable 20% NP charge with a buff to crit star generation, the ability to remove one enemy's buffs, and a party-wide buff to both quick and buster through her MP. All very useful. If you don't have Skadi, then Osaka Behime can make for a decent quick support with the effects from her NP, or a secondary buster support as well. Moving on to Jack the Ripper, this tiny assassin is quite the critical star generator, having a triple quick card deck, each at 5 hits. Jack, the Dismembering Daughter, is able to buff her quick attacks for a turn, remove one enemy's buffs plus debuff them with a reduced crit chance, and has a targetable heal on a very short 4-turn cooldown for more utility. Her quick-based NP can ignore an enemy's defense buffs, and she does increase damage against females, which are easy enough to find in the game. Then lastly, the older version of Li Shuwen, this so-called massage expert, of death perhaps, can dish out incredible burst damage. He's able to boost his critical strength briefly up to 100%, coupled with an ignored invincibility to ensure it lands, and to complement that, he can supply himself with stars and increase his absorption. Li also has a way or two to increase his attack that comes with a debuff immunity for good measure. Old Li's MP is a one-hit of destruction arts type that also has a chance to instant kill the target. Between the maniacal lolly and the mafia boss looking old man, it's Li that has a significant advantage in maximum MP1 damage, not including trait bonuses. Though Jack's MP1 damage will obviously go up when up against a female enemy. Of the three assassin choices, I would go with either Li Shuwen or Jack the Ripper. Obviously, if you have Castoria but no Scotty, or vice versa, that would play into which of the two single target servants you would choose. But I would again have to give a slight edge to Li Shuwen for his overall advantage in NP damage and story-locked scarcity factor. Now for the last of the 7 main classes, the Berserkers. There are 4 options: Vlad III, a single target unit; the story-locked Ku Kulane Altar, also a single target unit; Zhang Yu, who is AoE, and Nightingale, who has a support type NP. Single target options up first, starting with Vlad. He is a really capable ST Arts looper when teamed with a Castoria or 2. This Lord of Vampires can drain an enemy's NP gauge while charging his own up to 30%. He's also able to increase both his attack and defense, plus boost his MP generation to aid in his looping, along with gaining a stackable guts effect. After completing his NP rank up, it will lower the enemy's arts resistance and supply a good amount of critical stars. If you're looking for a universal single target attacker that can loop, Vlad fits that role nicely. As for Ku Altar, he is Buster, complete with a triple Buster deck. And while he can certainly dish out some damage with his high attack stat, you'll find his skills are geared more towards keeping him alive. He can debuff all enemies' attack and critical chance, while being able to evade a couple of attacks along with a buff to his defense. And as a last resort, he has a guts effect, all of which are nice for a usually squishy Berserker to have. Ku Altar's MP is getting a rank up with the 6th anniversary, which adds a very nice effect of removing his target's defensive buffs before the MP fires off. It can also further increase both his attack and defense as well. I also want to mention his Bond 10 CE, which is one of the better ones, granting him a guts effect and a fairly significant boost to his NP damage. Put all of this together, and Ku Altar is actually a really solid solo unit. Between Vlad and Ku Altar's NP1 damage, Ku has a pretty significant advantage, actually being the 3rd highest among all ST Berserkers. And that defensive buff removal effect it has cannot be understated. Though Vlad's placement is respectable, and he is more likely to fire off his NP multiple times in any given battle. The sole AoE servant among the Berserker choices is the quick base Zhang Yu. Not exactly an MP looper with double Scotty, this monstrous yet insightful servant is more suited to tackling boss fights. His first skill significantly increases both his star absorption and critical damage, along with providing him an evade. Zhang Yu can also buff his quick and buster performance and further boost his critical strength for some major burst damage potential. Complementing this, he does have a way to supply himself with crit stars and even ignore invincibility. This fabled warrior that captured Yume Ren's heart has a fairly straightforward MP, with the only effect from its overcharge, but it's a useful buff to his NP damage that activates first. The support type Nightingale has some useful tools for certain gimmick-heavy battles. The famed Angel of Crimea can target an ally with a debuff immunity coupled with a potent heal. For her own benefit, Nightingale can increase both her attack and defense against humanoid enemies, a trait that encompasses the majority of servants. She also has a targetable Buster performance increase, which will get a rank up in the future that adds crit stars and a crit damage buff to Buster cards. This eccentric nurse's NP has a number of helpful effects like debuffing all enemies' attack and NP damage, plus removal of the party's debuffs while healing them. She can be a fun servant to use in stall teams if you can leverage her overall kit to good effect. Ultimately though, my pick from this section of Berserkers is Kualter. He's one of those servants that's like a safety net. Have him in the back line to act as a last resort anchor, and more often than not, he will be able to claim victory if things went south for the rest of the party, especially if he's got his Bond 10 CE. Though he can certainly be used as a main attacker and would definitely benefit from the buster and crit support Koyanskaya can offer. And there is of course the scarcity factor with Kualter as well that I tend to find compelling. Vlad is a close second though, and depending on your overall roster and future banner plans, like if you have Castoria and don't plan to roll for Koyanskaya, he may be the better option. Vlad can be an excellent universal boss killer to have in your Chaldea. The final choices among the 32 SSRs belong to the extra classes. We have the ruler class Jeanne d'Arc, Sitanai, the story-locked alter ego, and the moon cancer Jinako Karigiri, all fairly different servant types. Jeanne was the very first ruler available in the game, so her kit is a little dated, having singular effects for 2 out of the 3 skills. The Maiden of Orleans can supply a modest amount of crit stars per turn. Her second skill just recently got a rank up, increasing the number of effects to 3, a reduction to 1 enemy's NP damage, along with 2 defense decreases to set things up for your main attacker. And she's also able to inflict a stun-like effect that ignores stun resistance or buffs. But her MP is where Jeanne really shines. Post-interlude, it provides the party with a 1-turn invincibility, 3-turn defense buff, and a 2-turn HP regen, along with removing any debuffs that may be hindering the party. With this NP, Jeanne works very well with a variety of stall teams. Sitanai is an arts-based single-target alter ego, and one with plenty of looping potential with the right supports. This version of Fate Stay Night's Ilya has an invincibility for survival that is coupled with a party-wide damage cut. She can boost her overall arts performance while having an immunity to debuffs. Sitanai also has a chance-based attack buff, a supply of crit stars per turn, and an NP battery of up to 30%. For this little Snow Fairy's NP, it will drain 1 tick of a dragon enemy's NP gauge, something that might not come up often but handy when applicable. It will also debuff the enemy with a defense and crit attack chance down. If you don't happen to have a single target alter ego, Sitanai is a great choice and performs very well. Now, there are not that many ST alter egos in the game currently, but for what it's worth, her MP damage sits at 2nd under Meltrillis. And for the last servant we'll be looking at, we have Jinako Karigiri, an AoE Arts Moon Cancer. Playing host to the Indian god Ganesha, Jinako is more of an offensive support tank. She can charge the party's NP gauge by up to 20%, always a nice effect, increase the party's attack, and buff everyone with crit stars per turn. There is a self-taunt and damage cut at her disposal that also boosts her own attack. Jinako is capable of a targetable invincibility that will also enhance the target's NP generation rate for a turn, though it comes with a 1-turn skill seal as a demerit, though that demerit is easy enough to sidestep. In the future, she gets an interlude which will add 2 more effects to this skill, a buff to the target's NP damage, and extra damage against enemies with the lawful alignment. This servant, who's also in the Shut-In Club with Osaka Behime, has an NP that will first reduce all enemies' defense, grants invincibility for herself, and heals herself for a decent amount. I think Jinako's Bond 10 CE is pretty interesting as well, effectively providing the same effect as the 5-star CE Fragments of 2030, plus a little bit of healing for the party per turn. It certainly lends to Jinako being an offensive support tank type. Just don't count on her outputting a lot of damage at MP1 among her Moon Cancer peers, until at least she gains her niche against lawful enemies. Now, between these 3 extra class options, I would probably go with Sitanai. She is a very good offensive servant to have with a well-rounded kit, and her being a story-locked SSR means this is an opportunity to acquire easily if you're in need of an alter ego. That said, it really does boil down to what your roster needs. If you don't have a ruler yet, Jeanne is certainly good to have, and of course that goes for Jinako if Moon Cancers are missing from your Chaldea. I feel that either of them would be helpful to masters just starting out. So now that we've covered all the available choices and my suggestions for each class, if you're still kind of undecided due to being in a position where any and all of these servants could help, then here is my overall suggestion. Waver. Most of the veterans in the game could probably attest to how useful Waver was as they journeyed through the story and events. Perhaps now he's been giving a much-deserved retirement with all of the other support units with MP charging abilities like Scotty, Rhinus, and Castoria. But if your servant roster is still small, and you lack anyone that can charge an attacker's NP gauge up to 50%, Waver will be a huge benefit. The great thing about Waver's skills, the NP charge effects don't scale with skill level, meaning that even at skill level 1 across the board, he will still provide a 50% charge for one ally. He can also be a workaround in the various meta support systems, pairing up with a borrowed Scotty or Castoria. Alternatively, if you're in a situation where your roster is filled with servants capable of arts looping, but unfortunately Castoria has once again eluded your summons, then Tamamo deserves serious consideration. The team composition to make Tamamo work with a friend support Castoria for 3-turn looping may not be ideal, but it can be made to work. Now, having said all of that, if you have a specific servant you really like, but they may not be the most ideal to enhance your servant roster, I'm of the opinion that you should just go for it. You know, the whole waifu or husbando before meta sentiment. FGO is meant to be fun, so I feel choosing a servant you will enjoy using plays right into that. If you have already decided who you're going to pick, then please let me know in the comments. Personally, my main account will be choosing Ketz, as she has evaded my previous attempts at summoning her, albeit it was a very long time ago, and I've had no other attempts since then. But I must have her join my Chaldea. As for my alternate account, the choice is based more on what that roster needs, so it will be Sitanai, as I could really use an ST alter ego capable of looping there, so she should fit that role perfectly. I certainly hope this was helpful to some, and if you enjoyed it, please don't forget to hit that like button. For more FGO content like this, please consider subscribing if you haven't already. Many thanks for watching, and until the next one, cheers!